Good morning. So everybody's really, really quiet. Obviously, you're all full of information from the previous session. Really good. Hopefully, we can keep you awake. I know it's early morning. It's day one. Everybody enjoying? Well, sorry, day two. Everybody enjoyed day one so far? Keynote, inspirational. Bit of information coming up. Everybody getting the ideas of what they're going to do with the HoloLens? I do. Are you going to use it at home? Don't know. But how's that for gaming or working at work? I know quite a few industries where they could use that quite well. The cool thing is it falls under Intune management. I wonder if I can swindle to get a device for myself. Don't know.
Right. My name's Vanita. I'm an infrastructure consultant at Intergen in Wellington. I work in the cloud design and integration team. I've been working with the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite for the last few years, mainly focusing on mobile device management using Microsoft Intune.
My name's Andrew Kosmodakis. I'm a long-winded name inside the Microsoft buildings. So the easiest way to describe it as I'm a technical specialist in the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So that covers off Microsoft's security elements, it covers mobility, covers data protection, covers identity management, and so on, whatever gets thrown into it. I've been dealing with what was called EMS for quite some years, and now it's called Enterprise Mobility and Security. Microsoft being who we are, we love to reuse acronyms, so it's EMS still. So if you hear us talking about EMS, it's Enterprise Mobility and Security. So.
Oh, sorry. Over eager with the clicker. Apologies. So today we're going to cover how you configure, deploy, and manage your mobile applications without device enrollment. Right. In the session today, we're going to cover enterprise mobility and security. Cos is going to do that because that's his baby. And then we're going to get into mobile application management, what it is, how you do it. We're actually in the configure and deploy mobile application management. That's how we're going to get into how you do it. And then we're going to go into the end user experience, and for the demos today we're going to be using an iPad. And we're going to keep the questions and answers till the very end, and I'm going to get Cos to do those. So, it's the whole splitting of the session, so yes. Okay, and so by the end of the session today, we are... Sorry. We're going to try and cover off the following questions, which is, what is MAM without device enrollment? Why do we need it? How does it work? Or when would you use it? And where do you configure it? So.
Is anybody using an MDM product today? AirWatch, Mobile Lines, and Mobile? Anybody using Intune along those lines? Yeah, cool, great. So we have to enroll the devices into the solution, right? And then we get the policies and the controls we want. So we want to take that mentality of enrolling devices and want to break it today. Right? We want to think away from enrolling devices. We're going to cover off a bit about device enrollment. We want to get more into how we're going to protect applications, protect the data that we're consuming on these applications, how we make organizations feel a little bit more comfortable, your organization or your partner communities or your clients that you're working with, and get them feeling comfortable that they're delivering content to their users on the devices they choose. It's very much a Microsoft term, right? We talk about the devices they choose from the locations they choose and so on. But making sure that it's secure. Right? Organizations are realizing that they've got to protect it. That's why we're using MDM, right? We don't use MDM because we had nothing else to do. We're actually using MDM because we're trying to protect the content. We're trying to protect the resources. We're trying to protect the devices and the users. So we've got to take that concept into the forward thinking around how we're protecting these applications and services going forward.
Oh.
So I'll quickly, briefly cover off enterprise mobility. Yep. It's funny when you've got multiple screens to work with. So enterprise mobility and security. So as I said before, it used to be the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And it had a whole bunch of products and services wrapped around it. And we sort of took a look at it and reinvented some of the elements of it. And over the past, probably a good 6 months to a year, Microsoft's really taken a big security focus onto its products and services. So one of the big quotes that's been floating around recently, Microsoft spends about $1 billion a year in security. Right? It makes it one of the biggest security companies in the world that nobody knows about. Right? So most people don't think Microsoft forefront for security, right? They don't think of it as the first company that comes through. So the focus is now in the cloud world, how do we bring security into things? So when we talk about enterprise mobility and security, it is really about making our users more mobile. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be on a mobile device. It could be on a Windows platform, could be on a Mac platform. It could be the data and the applications and the services they're consuming and how those users are getting access to them, how we're controlling access to it. That sort of forms up the picture of mobility. So don't just think the mobile phone that's in your pocket. A lot of those top scenarios that we're thinking about is how do we protect the Microsoft cloud services? So it's part of that entire the Microsoft platform. So Office 365, CRM Online. Then you start to think enterprise mobility. It builds on top of all those services. When you look at the enterprise mobility suite, or the security suite, you look at some of the elements and there's some double ups and components. But what happens is EMS then builds on top of those elements and provides greater control and greater security for us as IT admins. Office 365 is that front-facing, cool stuff that the users do. Enterprise mobility and security is all the stuff that we do in the background as infrastructure people. It's a little bit more boring, but it's still quite snazzy for us guys because we know we've got what we need, the control, but also supplying access and so on for our users and making it simpler for them to do the jobs. So some of the key things that we cover off inside it is identity protection, right? Protecting our identity in the cloud. Identity management, the bigger scope of SaaS application integration, cloud-based integration, your identity in the cloud. How do we make that seamless? There's quite a few companies out there that are really focusing on identity in the cloud now, taking SaaS application control, multi-factor authentication, self-service for your users. Then we talk about information protection, what we used to call RMS. Now, but we look at data classification and labeling and taking that into the future and how we actually control and manage the documents from birth, even once they've left our borders. You know, previously we didn't have control once they left our firewalls. Now we do have that control. And then we come down to MDM, the traditional, I've enrolled a device, I'm managing the device, I've deployed a Wi-Fi profile, I'm managing the device. And then we did some containerization. Anybody using the containerization services inside the MDM product to restrict data and content? There's a few. With that, the ability to then manage applications, MAM. This is all coming out of Intune. So the focus here today is about Intune, but we're talking about managing applications. So as we start to talk more about the MAM-WE features, and now the guess is, who knows what MAM-WE stands for? I didn't till recently as well, so don't worry about it. It's without enrollment, the WE. So the focus is about using Intune to manage applications without enrolling the device. That's an Intune service, but I want you to think about also using in conjunction with other third-party MDM products. If you are using AirWatch, if you are using Zen Mobile, there's something that can complement your existing deployments. So it's not a replacement conversation we're having here, it's a complementary discussion. So, there we go, build out, sweet. So with that in mind, I don't want to get too much into the marketing stuff around enterprise mobility and security, but the key focus here is around the users, the devices that they choose to use, the applications, and the data. Today we take a big focus on the users, the devices not so much, the applications very much so, and the data that the consumer is absolutely forefront. We're trying to make sure that we can hold control of that data because it's our corporate data. Cool. So identity in the Microsoft space, when we talk about using cloud services, underpins everything. If you take nothing else from today, identity, identity, identity. Your identity of the cloud is the key to everything you will do inside any of the Microsoft cloud services. If you have the identity incorrect, it's going to be a painful experience for your users. FUD in, FUD out, right? That old traditional stuff. Does it mean you have to remediate your Active Directory on premise? No. There's some elements of identity that you can do some remediation work to get your clean identity into the cloud, but this will be the foundational element of everything you do for your Microsoft cloud services. Office 365, the users sign in with their cloud identity. Intune, you sign in with your cloud identity. CRM, it's your cloud identity. As administrators of an Azure data center, we sign in with our cloud identity. Those are the key things that are going to underpin everything your users and your organization do in the cloud. So please remember, your identity is the key factor to everything here. What we're talking about with MAM is all identity-driven security.
Thank you. Right, out of the way. Now, what is mobile application management, or MAM? We're looking at the management of the mobile app. Think of it as a GPO, but for your mobile app. You can set data relocation and access boundaries on the applications that support these management capabilities. The end goal is to minimize data leakage and to prevent accidental sharing of organizational data. We're using MAM policies, so MAM policies can be applied to mobile devices which are enrolled in an MDM and those without MDM. So that's with device enrollment and without device enrollment. So let's look at the difference between MDM with MAM and MAM without MDM.
Either click on the next one. Yeah.
So MDM with MAM. So we're referring to MDM being mobile device management. We're looking at the management of the entire device. So the end user is required to enroll their personal or corporate device into this management solution. And if the device meets your organizational standards or is compliant, it will have access to your organizational resources. Now, your organizational resources are the things that we can deploy to the device, your Wi-Fi profiles, your VPN profiles, certificates, and the ability to deploy applications. So we can apply MAM policies to those applications that have that option available.
Does anybody find any reluctance from their users to enroll their personal devices in the corporate MDM?
Yeah, it's pretty time consuming. It's a bit of an enrollment, plus you've got that whole
Big Brother watching type scenario concerns and so on. Yeah.
So obviously with the ability to push these resources out, you also have the ability to remove them. So you can take off the Wi-Fi certificates, you can remove the applications, therefore removing the MAM policy, and with that you're removing your organisational identity and your organisational data from that mobile device. You've got reporting tools in Intune as well, but you're looking at the device inventory, that's device type, you've got whether the device is Exchange Active Sync enrolled, whether it's AD registered, the phone number, what software version they're on.
The traditional stuff that we see from MDM products, right? The asset manager wants to know what's happening with their corporate devices, but unfortunately we also report on the personal devices at the same time.
So yes, an important feature, an important thing to note here is that your mobile device management is done in the Intune console, so that's your manage.microsoft.com. So
anybody use that console, enjoy using that console?
Love it, yeah, it's fantastic.
Help is on the way.
Okay, so let's look at mobile application management now. So we'll look at it as a standalone, but bear in mind that it can be used in conjunction with your MDM solution as well. So what this is doing is you're applying your management layer to the application, not to the device. So users don't have to enroll their devices. If they're signing in to an application with their organisational ID, then the policies will be applied to the user with, across that ID. And of course, it goes across your multiple devices as well. So you can be working on your mobile, switch over, get home, work on an iPad or a tablet or anything where you're signing in with your org ID. Sorry, not anything. Android and iOS. That's what we're limited to here. Well, I say limited. It's not really a limit.
Hey, it's a non-Microsoft platform. We get beaten up if it's only a Microsoft platform, right? So we can win sometimes, I guess.
Okay, so for MAM, we are doing everything in the newish Azure portal. And within the Azure portal, there's a couple of other features now available. We've got app reporting by user, and that shows you what mobile apps the user is accessing and how frequently they are using that app. If your user leaves your organization or loses their phone or mobile, you can either remove their license from that application or send out a wipe request, which is if you've been using Intune, it's a selective wipe. You're removing the organizational ID from those mobiles. Therefore, they no longer have access to your organizational data. Mr. Cosmodakis?
So what I want to do at this point is introduce a new concept about multiple identity aware applications. So think of an application like Outlook, the Outlook app for iOS or Android. You can have your personal Hotmail account, your Gmail account, but you can also have your org account in there, so my Microsoft.com account, and I can get my personal email and my work email on the same application. That application by default is multiple identity aware. Same way that ActiveSync was in the past, right? So now we take it forward a little bit and we think about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Yammer if you're using it, and some of the other Microsoft first-party applications from Office 365.
You need a click.
Okay. Oh, I haven't clicked. Look at that. And the ability to actually have multiple personas inside the application. So think about running up Word, and within Word having your personal Hotmail account, but also your corporate account in there.
He means Outlook, by the way.
Oh, Outlook.com, there you go, sorry. It's living in the past, too much of a dinosaur. And with that, being able to have multiple identities in there, so accessing your personal data, but also accessing your work documents inside the application. So these applications then allow you to do things like open up a corporate document, copy and paste any of the content between those applications and services as you feel free. So in the case here, I've got the freedom to build out as I need, but also copy and save documents where I want, right? And I could have taken it out of my Hotmail account and been doing this, my Outlook.com account and do the same thing, or take it out of my Microsoft.com work account and copy and paste data into my personal context. So those applications now don't protect the data. The data is free running, I have no control over it. With the multiple identity aware applications, we start to talk about the concept of being able to decipher when an application or when data within an application is within which persona. And starting to apply policy to the user in the application based on the user's identity. Again, the identity is the key factor here. The user is signing in with their corporate account. At that point there, I can start to apply policy that says if it's coming from the corporate profile, allow the user to open the application, allow the user to save the content between managed applications and the corporate identity, but don't allow it to cross the boundary into the personal persona. So from a content point of view, it may be a financial report, it could be the end of year report, it could be just customer data. But I've got control of it and I'm keeping control of it by managing it and making sure that it's within the boundaries and limitations that I'm prescribing as an administrator for my organisation. Now we can talk about control, we can talk about boundaries, we can talk about guide rails, but the reality is we're trying to slow the process of our users making mistakes, right? Some of them may be malicious mistakes. We've seen WikiLeaks and everything else where people have transferred data and running around with it, but also users generally do make mistakes, right? So this is putting a bit of a guide rail up for them to help them with that, to stop them making accidental mistakes on data leakage. Is anybody willing to admit they've suffered data leakage? Yeah, probably not.
Are these two things going to be running parallel paradigm, or one is making the other one redundant? So using corporate user identity for securing the data, corporate data, is mobile device management becoming redundant? You don't need to focus that much on securing the devices, but you secure the access from the application using a corporate profile, and hence the data is secure.
Okay. Question is whether the MAM or the MAM without enrolment is making MDM redundant, in summary, right? I would say yes in some scenarios, but no in others. There are environments where highly secure environments where you need critical and deep control over a device, and you may still have the MDM component where you actually want to deploy certificates for certificate-based authentication. You might have Wi-Fi profiles that you want to enforce. Those types of scenarios, or data that you want to control, supervision mode that you might want to control on the device. So you want to be able to lock that device down and control it at that layer. But this is about more around the freedom for users to move around device platforms if they need to, or move across the device itself, the physical device, but you still having that control. So think of a admin type worker or an EA, for example, who may have access to the CEO's mailbox. She may want to go home and work on an iPad, that's her device, and sign in and have the freedom to keep consuming that information and working it from home. But we don't necessarily want to have an MDM solution over that device. But if you think of somebody in a security area of your business and contractual defense or something along those lines, or accounts, where you may want to have further deep control, or in a warehouse scenario, we want to control the experience for those users on that device as well. So there is a bit of a mismatch, and there's going to be a matrix of when you would use this and when you may not use this. But think about this from adding another layer of security over the top of an MDM, where you're actually controlling the user's roaming state across platforms and applications. I guess that's part of the critical part.
That was my question, because getting the user to enroll their personal
Yep.
device with corporate security policies of the corporate,
Yep.
and like what you said, Big Brother watching you, is now securing the app with the user's corporate identity, making that worry, that concern go away.
It can, yes. Okay, I'm going to do the consultant response with, but what are your requirements, and so on and so on and so on, right? So, you know, we can then work into an analysis and design phase, but I'll move on from that part. So when we start talking about the multiple identity applications, right now, very focused on the Microsoft application stack. So Office Mobile, Office for iOS, then we've got the CRM applications, Power BI. The cool thing is, partners are getting on board. This isn't a Microsoft-only story. So we've got people like Adobe, we've got SAP, we've got Box all coming to the party who are baking the Intune MAM policy SDK information into their apps so that they can start supporting MAM without device enrollment and making these applications managed apps. So these slides will be available later on if you guys want to grab them. But the other cool thing about it is if your organization is writing a line of business application, you too can then add the lines of code that are needed to support MAM-based policies without device enrollment. So if you want to deliver your application to your users, have them downloaded off a website or out of the store, you can have control over those applications that are your corporate applications across those device platforms as well.
Actually, that's one thing to note is with mobile application management, without device enrollment, you don't have the ability to push those applications down to the users. It's up to the users. It's whether they are consuming the application themselves. So if they're using it, they're signing in with their organisational ID, then those policies will be applied. If they're not actually using that application with their organisational ID, no policies will be applied to them.
Classic example, right? Most downloaded apps available at the moment on the iOS store, for example, with the Office apps. Right? So those applications already exist on some of those devices. But if the user was to go and download, let's say, Power BI on their personal iPad, they may want to do this. There are people that do that. If we've got the policies in place, we can control the user's ability to share any content within those applications. So we can actually go, here are the guide rails, let you run the application. You've downloaded it on a personal device, but we're going to actually give you a bit of a guide rail experience, but the freedom to actually work on the device that you choose as well.
What
Yep.
about inbuilt mail programs, so
Ah.
things on the device?
Yeah.
Right.
So what we'd do is we'd tie that into a conditional access discussion. Come to Friday's session.
No, so yes, so conditional access for mobile device management
Yep.
at this stage, yes.
Yep.
If
So
you
this-
have,
This basically hangs on, say, having the Outlook application, using
Yes.
the Outlook app,
yeah, but
versus
you,
using the inbuilt.
Yes, yeah. The inbuilt applications by default are just active sync agents, right? Basic authentication, no modern authentication support, no policy support, other than here's a mail profile. So,
you can resolve that. Sorry, so that question was, native email clients on your mobile device, and restricting that is done through the Exchange admin console. So you want to set your device access rules there to say, I think it's called Outlook families. That's basically Outlook for Android and iOS is one policy that you can set there and say to users, if you want to access your organisational email or your corp email, you have to use Outlook.
Surprise, Friday session's over.
No, that's not conditional access. That's
It's
different.
close to. So there you go, you covered off the mail part of my session on Friday, so thank you very much. No, it's great.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what's the problem we're actually trying to solve, right? We want to provide our users with flexibility. That's the first thing, right? Give them the option to work across the devices that they want to work on. The reality is they're probably already doing it. How many people have got an MDM managed device from work and have their email running on another platform or another device somewhere? The rest of you are probably lying. The reality is it's happening. How do we start to take control of this, or how do we actually build in a bit more security around it? It's not a replacement always for an MDM solution, right? So there are going to be times, as we discussed, where you are going to need an MDM solution. But it can be used in conjunction with your MDM solution to complement the management of your corporate data and your identity and your devices and your applications, right? So when the user doesn't want to enroll their personal device, maybe they get limited functionality via another method like MAM. Or when they are working on a device that's non-MDM managed, you're at least providing some level of granular security and control over that device yourself. And of course, the most important part, security, 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 secure access, and data protection. We're wrapping our controls around it to make sure we are in a good state as much as we can be on these types of platforms and devices.
Right. Okay, so we're going to go into configuring and deploying now. As mentioned earlier, we are doing all of this stuff in the Azure portal. And it's pretty simple to implement. Basically, 3 easy steps. We add a policy, we apply that policy to the application, and then we bundle that whole lot up and we target it to a user group. Now, the user group is already in Azure AD. Right, let's get into our demo. 7, I think it was. Yep. Boom. Okay.
Anybody recognize this portal? Not Silverlight based.
Right, so
Sorry,
first of all, let's get Intune. Down here in More Services, we type in Intune. Excuse me for my typing skills today. I am a little bit nervous.
The key thing to understand, this is the Intune MAM console. It's not the Intune MDM console. That's still separated out. We'll probably discuss that towards the end of the session, actually.
Right, I've just ticked on the star there, and the star puts it into our resource blade on the side. So there we go, sorry about the pop-ups. In our summary tab here, we have 4 tiles. Now the 4 tiles are referring to, sorry, excuse me for a second, I'm just going to grab this device here. Okay, so we've got the 4 tiles here. We've got user status for iOS and Android. We have here managed by policies and no policies. Now, the managed by policies bit refers to the number of users being managed by MAM policies. When we've got no policies here, we're referring to the number of apps used when no MAM policies are being applied. Now, when we see things in the no policy one, in the no policy enumerator here, we can use that information, go over to app reporting by user, and here we can run a report, see what user, how frequently the user is accessing this app and where they're accessing it from, and then create the policy if we need, or apply policy to that application. we have here flagged users. Now that refers to jailbreak and router devices. These are just quick tiles to provide a summary of what you can see in the settings themselves. We also have a wipe request. Now that just is a link to where you would initiate a selective wipe. The selective wipe being removing your organisational ID from those applications, therefore removing the data or access to that data.
Key thing to understand is not the factory reset option you would get in an MDM, right? We're not targeting the device, we're targeting the data and the user's identity and the content inside that application. That's the key elements to remember there.
Right, so in the settings blade here, basically it's a link to where you'd find the summary information. What we're going to do today is go into app policy. So that's where we're setting our MAM policies here. I've already created a couple here just for demo purposes and to make it look a little bit full.
Well, before she dives in too deep, one of the biggest misconceptions out there at the moment is that Intune only manages Windows devices. So Intune is fully supportive of iOS and Android platforms. Funny enough, this currently doesn't support Windows devices. And that's not just Windows Mobile, it's Windows 10 as a platform, or Windows 8 and Windows 7 as a platform. So this is very much about Microsoft's focus on the third-party products and services as well. So in this case, we are talking about iOS and Android devices. And if anything, I want to highlight the fact that Microsoft's Intune services actually have zero-day support for a lot of the iOS and Android OSs as they come release. So where on some of the on-premise deployments or even the multi-tenant deployments, you have to do an upgrade. In an Intune service, there is zero-day support. So the moment Apple or Google release their code for the latest operating system, Intune is supporting it from day dot. And it's ready to roll with it. So this is one of the key points around the Intune side of things, and especially when you're looking at targeting iOS and Android devices from an Intune point of view, from MAM, it does support iOS and it does support Google. So, sorry, Benita.
No, that's all right, Cos. Right, okay, so we're going to go and add a policy. Now you'll see here we've got our basic settings that we need to set, need to fill in. So we're going to do a ballroom, what are we, ballroom 2?
Yeah.
All right, and we'll set it for iOS today. So I'm just going to put a quick note in the heading itself and the name of the policy, just what it's actually doing. So we're going to do Ignite 2016, just so we've got a little bit of information. You can see here we're setting the platform here, iOS in this case, and we are going to select our applications. Now these are the ones that are already pre-baked with your, well, that are MAM enabled. So we'll select a couple here.
If your line of business application had been added in, it would appear in that part of the console as well. You've got to upload it first and it registers and it goes through so you can apply policy to it.
That's one that I had put in. It was a fake one. I'll show you how in a minute, but that's one that I had put in yesterday, is Ignite 2016. I said that it had MAM stuff and it's pretty much just an empty shell. But yes, it enumerates through. So we select these apps. We can see here we've got the 5 applications selected, and then we go into the nitty-gritties of the actual policy setting itself. So you can see here we've got it separated into data relocation and access. Now data relocation is how the user is going to handle the data inside the application, and the access is how the user is going to access the data from the app. So that interaction, so the signing into the apps and the PIN codes and whatnot. So if we are unsure of what these policies are doing or what the options are, it's good to do a little highlight over the I, the little information note, and it will give you a really good description and clear description, as opposed to my waffling. Okay, so we've got the ability here to prevent iTunes and iCloud backups, and we have the same in Google as well. in the Android option, preventing backups. We're going to select yes here. That way we are removing the option for the end user to take our organisational data and save it into their personal cloud storage.
Almost defeats the purpose if we enable it, right? If we don't enable the setting to disable cloud. Do we want to have our content managed, or do we want to give it to a third party to manage? If we're trying to manage the content, we should probably keep it from being in the backups.
Okay, we have two settings here that look fairly similar. We've got allow app to transfer data to other apps, and we have three options here. We've got policy managed apps, all apps, and none. And we have the same for the receive data from other apps. So transfer data is transferring information from your managed app to, say, any other app. So the ability to copy the data or move it across. We're going to stick with policy managed apps only, because that way we're going from managed to managed, keeping it within our corporate persona. Realm, yes, corporate realm. Now, allowing app to receive data from other apps. Now, we want the ability to take data from other applications. Say somebody sends you an email to your Gmail account that you've got linked into Outlook. We want the ability to copy information from there and put it into our corporate one, because we want to share that information with our workmates. And we don't want our workmates to have our personal email account.
Well, those funny YouTube videos are important, right? We've got to share them around
Cats.
the team.
Cats. Everyone
Yeah,
loves cats.
everyone wants photos of cats.
Okay. Sorry, let me just sort myself out here. Okay. Sorry. There we go. What else have we got? Preventing save as, so that's preventing the ability to save a copy into your personal storage or your personal cloud accounts.
Or the device itself, in that fact, right? So
Yeah.
an iOS device being able to save the content to the device itself.
We've got restrict, cut, copy and paste with other apps. Now there's two options in there that look very similar. So that is the policy managed apps and the policy managed apps with paste in. Now the difference between the two is policy managed apps, we're looking at the ability to cut, copy and paste between the managed apps, and with paste in allows you to copy information from unmanaged apps into your managed apps. We've got restricting content to managed browsers, so that's you can ensure that your users are opening up links into a managed browser. So you've got an Intune managed browser there. That's just adding security over what users can open and where, whether it's Safari or Chrome or whatever else they've decided to download onto their device. If you select yes, I'm going to select no because I don't want to restrict it at this stage, but if you select yes and they don't have the managed browser, it's just going to prompt them, once they click on a link, it'll say, oh, you can't access this unless you download the managed browser, and it will send you a link to go and do that.
From the appropriate store. So it's smart enough to understand that iOS goes to the App Store, Android goes to Google Play. So.
Yeah. Okay, so and the encrypt data is basically how the app encrypts the data. So at a default level, we're looking at every time the device is locked, the data gets encrypted.
It's important to note that it's based on the device's encryption policies, right? So if the device supports, was it FIPS that's supported by iOS, for example, that's what it will use, whatever's the device itself supports, as opposed to a Microsoft policy that's been applied or an ISO standard that's coming in over the Intune policies.
Okay. Disable contact sync. Now, I reckon that this is is fairly important. You don't really want users to have the ability to save contacts into their native address book. It's very similar to your Outlook question from before, or the native email client from before. Think of all of those applications that you've allowed. So, you know, when you accept the terms and conditions of, say, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, it's gleaning your contacts list. Now, if you have the ability to sync your person or your global address list into your personal contacts list, what you're saying is these applications then have access to everyone in your organisation. And unless you really don't like your employees, you probably don't want to set that. And we've talked about the Outlook app because that was my other note to mention. Right, sorry, I've just been pointed out the time, so we better hurry up. Okay, so require PIN for access. We've got that currently set to yes, and that's just to show you how you can set PIN codes on the application, so you have to sign or you have to enter in the PIN before you can access the application itself on the mobile device.
And that's within the user's persona, not the corporate persona, not their personal persona. So if they've signed into Word, for example, and they're going to access Word as their Outlook.com account, they won't get prompted for a PIN. But if they switch modes and sign into your corporate account, they'll get prompted for a PIN. Some environments you may want to actually be able to decipher control at that layer in case there's the top coffee table tablet that somebody's picked up and started to switch between modes. Something to consider. PIN length, you've got the limit of, the minimum requirement of 4. Now just bear in mind that with iOS 10, I think the PIN code to get into the device itself is 6. So think about consistency there. Especially from a user experience, right? If they've got 4-digit PIN to remember at one phase and a 6-digit PIN to remember at another point, you know, you might want to be a bit more consistent on how you do your policies as well. Right.
And require corporate credentials for access. Now, if you really don't like a group of your staff, put them in their own user group, make them sign in every time they want to access those applications. Block manage apps from running on jailbroken and rooted devices. Now, that was your flagged users, that tile from earlier in the summary screen. This is an important one here, is rechecking the access requirements after so many minutes. So how long it's going to take for these access policies to kind of reapply on that application. And the offline, so offline interval days before the app data is wiped is for those users who like to do a lot of work offline, editing documents or whatnot. It basically gives them a time limit on the number of days that they have. Remember, this is days. The number of days that they have before they have to come back online, recheck in, and do all that kind of stuff. That probably would help with making sure that the software versions are all up to date, making sure that they are kind of keeping in line with company policies and making sure that they're saving the documents to the right locations as well. And if you forget to sign out on, say, your kids' devices, or if you're mucking around on a friend's tablet or mobile device, you've signed in with your organisational ID. If you haven't signed in for a number of days, it's going to take your data off that device. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Will they give you a heads up before it wipes that data? Just as someone's been working offline and making changes?
There is a prompt that appears. Yeah.
It just goes.
There is a prompt that says the administrator has issued a wipe on this. But what it doesn't,
When it's happening.
yeah, so
Not
the
that it's
user
going
doesn't
to,
have a cancel option or anything like that, right? We want to keep that data secure, so it's a matter of just, yeah.
I was thinking if you gave them a heads up a couple of days beforehand to remind them to go and sync it if they have been...
Making notes?
Because I just know somebody, probably the CEO, is going to be doing something on their personal iPad, alters some documents,
Yeah.
80 days later offline, and then have it disappear.
Keep saying it. Keep saying it. He works for engineering. Keep saying it.
Right. I'm going to unpin to dashboard because I don't want the dashboard to be cluttered. I'll OK this. And now we're going to get into deploying it. So, sorry, I lie. Click Create. That creates the policy. It adds it to your policy list here. We'll click on the policy once it's been added, and then we'll get into deploying it. So there's our policy there. I've already pre-configured our user groups just to make it easier. Now there's 3 options there for adding a user group. One is a direct assignment, so you can assign a user to a group, or you can do a dynamic device enrollment using dynamic grouping. So you can either add a user or add a device into a group using dynamic membership.
Just a question on that. How would I dynamically add a device to one group based on whether it's a BYOD and another group based on it being a CYOD automatically?
So out of Intune at the moment, that's not one of its elements. That's an Active Directory feature that is currently unavailable right this minute, but is something that, actually we can take that one offline and have a bit of chat with her about it as well. So, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have much information that I can share on that one directly today for dynamic groups. I'll introduce you afterwards.
Okay, so I have my groups listed there. I'm going to select Ignite MAM. How are we going for time? We are very... Okay, right. Sorry, guys. Okay, so that is us done with deploying, configuring and deploying a mobile application to a user group.
Was that easy enough for everyone? It's actually a lot more, a lot simpler than it is for when you're doing MDM, to be honest. What I'm going to quickly do for the sake of time is cover off some of the user experience elements. You know, what is it, at the end of the day, it comes down to what's the experience the users are going to go through. That's quite a key piece of the puzzle.
Sorry.
So what we've got is, you know, what does the user have to do? They simply sign into the app with their corporate credentials, right? They will be prompted they'll have to acknowledge a couple of prompts. Those are governed by the devices. So the iOS platform or the Android platform. It's not something that Microsoft can circumvent. The APIs require prompts. We have to go through the prompt methods. It's also going to depend on the policies you set. Right? So if you're going to set a policy that says you require a managed browser, then the user's going to get a prompt to go off and download a managed browser when they go to run a link. If you set a PIN, the user's going to be prompted for a PIN. Those sorts of elements are the things that you need to consider while you're creating your policies. But also, is it something that you go, well, them clicking OK to a prompt, does it really bother me that they have to do that once? Or maybe they can dismiss the notification about the fact that the application is now managed by corporate policy. That is something that is prompted by default. They do notify the users, hey, the application now is managed. So that's a key element to keep in consideration. So what we'll do is quickly sign into one of the devices.
Okay, that's number 8.
To show you guys what the experience looks like. And what we've done is a bit of a cooking show here, right? So we've pre-baked one device, and we've got another device that's just sitting there ready to be added to. So this is a device that's non-managed. Vinny, can you do me one quick favour, please?
Yep.
Can you just run up settings?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So under a managed device, go to down the bottom.
Down the bottom, yeah.
Around where we see, where is it? The Intune Wi-Fi sync, sorry, iTunes, and the VPN, you would normally see management profiles. At that point, that means the device is managed by an MDM. That's just the way these devices operate. They have to have a management profile assigned, and they appear under this. So this case here, this device is completely unmanaged, and it is a standalone home user device. It's got Netflix. I'm mucking around with it. It's my personal device as well. So what we're going to do is we've pre-baked Word and Excel and everything on it, like I normally would. And what we've actually done is just had the personal personas added to them. So what Vinita's going to walk through is the ability to add the corporate accounts now through and what the user experience may be like. And if the demo gods are good.
Add an email.
It's in notes.
It's a note. That's right. We have, look at this. So great. Select all. Oops. copy that. Paste. Okay, add that account. Enter in my really secure password.
We will be changing it after this session.
It's so secure though. I added digits. Okay.
So as you see here, we've previously enrolled this device, well this application, sorry, into one of our tenants with multiple identities. So it's actually prompting which one of these accounts should I actually remove. So if you think of a pooled device, even in an environment where you may have a number of devices available for use to grab if they're traveling or anything like that, we are able to then clarify, hey, there are policies associated with this ID into these apps now. Do you want us to actually overwrite them?
And this is what we get. So the organisation is now protecting the data on this app, and we need to restart the app. So click OK, it closes it, and then you can open it up again. And because I've set the passcode requirement, we need to set up a passcode.
That's cool.
So, okay.
So that's the sort of experience your users will get, right? It's those types of prompts based on the policies that you are applying and the configuration that you're setting on these devices. Might as well flick over to the other device now and do that for the sake of time. We've got a matter of 10 minutes. So this next device, what we've done is we've pre-configured all the policies that the users have already authenticated to them. Yeah, here's a cake that we prepared earlier. And this device now is about showing you guys what the user experience is once the policies are applied, once the users are signed into their apps, and what happens when they try to do the things that we're actually trying to put some guide rails up around. So think of saving a document to the iPad, think about saving it to their own, if they had Dropbox on there, or if they had OneDrive for personal, being able to save that content in different locations.
iPads, eh? What is going on? Sorry, guys.
What is it?
I don't know what it's doing. Spazzing out.
Your company requires you to use this. Oh, you've turned off your device pin on this one too, haven't you?
All
right. There you go. Changes before we went to stage so we didn't have to keep entering pins. There you go. So we've actually broken our own demo.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so let's just quickly enter in turn passcode on. So
Vanita, the restrictive administrator.
okay.
Another thing to note is that where your biometrics are supported on the devices, these applications will actually support biometric support as an option for PIN. So the same way where in iOS or even the Google devices where you can actually use a biometric to override the PIN need, having the simplicity of Touch ID or biometric logins for these applications is also supported.
All right, so Priyanka
And you, of course, have the control over that.
Priyanka's sent me an email. I just want to copy, I want to have a look at the document here. Let's see if we can save it to our OneDrive for business, sorry, our personal OneDrive. Saving is not allowed. This is the save as function. So let's close that. Let's open it up in Word. Okay, so we're going to go and see if we can save a copy of it. Oh, great. This is great, isn't it?
You can see the policies are taking effect, right?
The number of times that we've been practicing this is, you know.
At least the policies work. That's the key point to take away from it, right? It doesn't matter that it's not working in a demo. The policies are doing what we're telling them to do. We've issued a wipe, it's issuing the wipe.
Okay, so we'll see if we can open it up again in Word. And it's probably going to prompt me for a PIN now because I've also set access policies for this application, so fantastic.
For the sake of time, we've got 5 odd minutes left.
Okay, so basically what I was trying to show you is that you would be unable to save it to your device, just as you were unable to save it to your personal OneDrive.
Have we got any questions? Is probably the thing while Vanita taps away on the screen. Any other questions? Go for it.
Is there any configuration needed to enable the
No, what happens is it's actually just a policy setting. Sorry, the question was, is there any configuration required to enable the Touch ID rather than PIN? It's an option inside the policies to allow for Touch ID support.
Save a copy.
We issue the wipe command to the device, wipe the application, the corporate application data, and let the user reset up again. So you take it through that sort of motion again. There's no need for a remote PIN reset, for example, because you're not actually deleting the data from the back-end service, you're just taking it off that device at the time, the application. So
sorry, there's your administrator doesn't allow saving to personal location. So we've got that working now, so well done.
Support like for backwards compatibility with older versions of Android and iOS.
So the Intune minimum requirements are supported by this platform. So if I remember correctly, it's 4.22. One of my test devices is 4.24. 4.22 for Android and above, and then I think it was iOS 7 and above for things. There will be things that are specific to operating system levels, right? So when Touch ID got added to the functionality of the operating system, I think that was iOS 8, correct, or 9. That functionality won't be, of course, supported on iOS 7. So if you have a fleet of devices, or users have a fleet of devices that are running those things, you've got to take those considerations into your planning around that stuff as well. So you allow the PIN, but you maybe allow Touch ID as well, so that's where you've got backup for that scenario. Right at the back. Sorry, go again?
Oh, yep, I can show you that. Let's. This is one that should work straight away instead of having.
So the managed
rubbish.
policies where we had the paste and the paste in, for example, it was about stopping the ability to save to the clipboard. Because we're allowing, there's an option for none, so don't allow anybody to don't allow any copying across any managed apps or unmanaged apps. But there's also the copyability between managed apps. So if you take, for example, Word, Excel, Outlook, and manage those in one group, and allow those to be managed applications within themselves, you can allow copy and paste. But if you go for an unmanaged app, that ability, that won't break those boundaries.
Maybe I missed something, but just during your demo, if you already have this Outlook email on it, and the user removes the pen, so he can just get onto the device gets stolen, perp gets the device, adds the pen, voila, he's into the Outlook. It doesn't seem that there was any barrier between it.
But in this case here, what we've done is we've actually specified that the device required a PIN. So maybe that's part of your corporate policy to say, you know what, if you are going to access those managed apps that I'm providing you, I do require you to have some level of device level security, at least at a PIN layer. So, have that multiple authentication types as opposed to multi-factor authentication. Sorry?
How we enforce that?
Via policy, you say, that's why we couldn't sign in, because we removed the PIN.
You couldn't sign in, but once you added the pen, you could have signed in into the actual email.
No, because I see what you mean, yes.
Yeah.
That scenario would have to probably test out with you, actually.
That was kind of after effect.
Yep.
You just added the pen.
Yep.
While you were back into the...
Yeah, true. The policy is checked first, actually, before the content is provided. So it does do a policy check. Yeah. I'll grab your details and we'll do a quick test.
If you define a policy for one app multiple times with different policies, what one wins?
Exact same way as group policy, right? Most restrictive applies. So think of this, literally what Vanita said at the start, as GPOs for your mobile devices. So one quick, easy way to look at it is almost like having a default domain policy and applying MAM policies at the top layer across your MDM fleet, or your MAM fleet. So. Any others?
How does this, BYOD, one of the challenges you've got is always security investigations, right? So what visibility do I get of the device when I'm using a MAM-only approach in terms of user logging or...
So it's the auditing that we get. Yeah. It's the auditing level that we're getting at the moment. If there are some other stuff, then we'll have a chat. I know what your requirements are, so we can have a bit of a separate chat around that one. Yeah.
Anyway, you're automating the wipe the device from the credentials data?
When the credentials are removed, it wipes the device data straight away. So it doesn't leave the data behind.
So from the device or the user at the organization?
From the device, but also you think when you remove the user out of Azure Active Directory, the policies no longer apply, the user can't authenticate back into that application service, therefore the application removes the user's policy. So. bit of a chain there, isn't there?
Can you customize the text on the pop-up alerts?
No, not at this stage. It's like having a PA, it's awesome.
Can you use Enrolment to the word mobile app as their user, as their personal and corporate persona at the same time?
Yes, in this case you are signed in. They're all multi-identity aware. So, all right. I know we've got to give room to the other people coming through. So if you've got any other questions, feel free to come and hound me over here. Hey, thanks very much for your time, guys.
Thank you.